Rachel Carter had always been the kind of person who thrived in the background. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room, nor did she crave the spotlight. Yet, her presence was undeniable, a quiet force that kept everything running smoothly. For 12 long years, Rachel worked as Sundar Pichai's assistant, and during that time, she became an indispensable part of his journey at Google. Her role might have seemed simple to outsiders, managing schedules, organizing meetings, handling logistics, but those who truly understood knew better. Rachel didn't just do her job, she anticipated needs before they even arose. When Sundar first joined Google as a product manager, Rachel was assigned to him almost by chance. At the time, neither of them could have predicted how far their partnership would take them. Sundar was brilliant, no doubt about it. But brilliance often comes with chaos. Ideas poured out of him faster than anyone could keep up with, and he needed someone who could translate his vision into actionable plans. That's where Rachel came in. She quickly learned how to navigate his fast-paced world, balancing multiple demands while maintaining an air of calm efficiency. Over time, she developed an uncanny ability to read between the lines, knowing when to push back gently or when to step aside and let things unfold naturally. As Sundar climbed the ranks within Google, so too did Rachel evolve alongside him. When he transitioned from overseeing Chrome to leading Android, Rachel adapted seamlessly, learning the nuances of each new responsibility. By the time Sundar became CEO, Rachel had become more than just an assistant. She was a trusted confidant, a sounding board for ideas, and a gatekeeper who ensured only the most critical matters reached his desk. Colleagues often joked that if you wanted something done right, you didn't go through official channels. You went straight to Rachel. And while some people might have resented being overshadowed, Rachel never minded. She took pride in making others look good, believing that success was rarely achieved alone. But what made Rachel truly remarkable wasn't just her skill set, it was her humanity. While executives debated strategies and engineers brainstormed innovations, Rachel focused on the little things that held everything together. She remembered birthdays, sent thoughtful messages after tough days, and always found ways to make people feel valued. If an employee was struggling, Rachel would discreetly check in, offering support without expecting anything in return. This empathy extended beyond her immediate team. During charity drives or community events, Rachel was often the one rallying colleagues to participate, reminding everyone that their impact shouldn't stop at the office doors. Despite her contributions, Rachel remained largely invisible to the outside world. Media coverage celebrated Sundar's leadership and Google's groundbreaking achievements, but rarely mentioned the woman working tirelessly behind the scenes. To many, Rachel was simply Sundar's assistant, a title that failed to capture the depth of her role. Still, she didn't mind. Recognition wasn't why she got up every morning. What mattered most to her was knowing she'd made a difference, however small. However, as the years passed, cracks began to form beneath Rachel's polished exterior. The relentless pace of Silicon Valley took its toll. Days blurred into nights and weekends disappeared altogether. There were times when Rachel felt like she was living two separate lives, one inside Google's gleaming offices and another outside, trying to hold onto fragments of normalcy. Friends noticed she laughed less, her shoulders carried more tension, and her once bright eyes now held shadows of fatigue. The turning point came not because of any single event, but rather a gradual realization. The company she loved wasn't the same place she'd joined all those years ago. Back then, Google had been fueled by passion and creativity. Employees dreamed big, unafraid to fail because failure meant learning. But somewhere along the way, priorities shifted. Innovation gave way to profit margins, collaboration turned into competition, and the sense of family eroded under the weight of corporate ambition. Rachel watched as colleagues burned out, leaving disillusioned and bitter. She saw talented individuals silenced because their ideas didn't align with short-term goals, and she couldn't ignore the growing disconnect between the company's stated values and its actions. For Rachel, this dissonance hit especially hard. Outside of work, she poured her energy into pursuits that brought her joy and fulfillment. She wrote poetry late at night, capturing emotions too complex for words during the day. She volunteered at local schools, teaching kids about technology and encouraging them to dream fearlessly. These activities reminded her of what truly mattered: connection, purpose, and authenticity. Yet, as fulfilling as these moments were, they also highlighted how empty her professional life had become. The longer she stayed, the more she questioned whether she was still serving a greater mission or merely perpetuating a system she no longer believed in. Still, Rachel hesitated to leave. Loyalty ran deep in her veins, and walking away felt like abandoning not just Sundar, but the ideals she'd once shared with the company. Plus, there was comfort in familiarity. After 12 years, Google wasn't just a workplace, it was home. Leaving meant stepping into the unknown, confronting fears she'd buried deep inside. So she stayed, hoping things might improve. But hope, as it turned out, wasn't enough to sustain her forever. Rachel's transformation didn't happen overnight. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. A flicker of doubt here, a fleeting moment of frustration there. But over time, these small shifts began to add up, reshaping the way she saw herself and her role within Google. For years, Rachel had prided herself on being adaptable, capable of handling anything thrown her way. Yet as the company grew larger and more complex, so too did the demands placed upon her. What had once been manageable now felt overwhelming, and what had once been fulfilling now left her questioning her purpose. It wasn't just the workload that weighed on her, it was the growing disconnect between her personal values and the direction the company seemed to be heading. When Rachel first joined Google, it felt like a place where innovation thrived without compromise. The motto, "Don't be evil," wasn't just a slogan. It was a guiding principle. Employees were encouraged to think big, take risks, and create solutions that could genuinely improve lives. But as Google evolved into one of the largest tech giants in the world, priorities shifted. Decisions increasingly revolved around profit margins, market dominance, and appeasing shareholders. The spirit of collaboration that had once defined the workplace began to fade, replaced by internal politics and competition. Rachel noticed these changes in small but significant ways. For instance, during team meetings, discussions about user experience or societal impact often took a backseat to conversations about revenue targets and growth metrics. Ideas that once sparked excitement were now scrutinized through the lens of feasibility and financial return. Even Sundar, whom Rachel admired deeply, seemed caught in this web. His speeches still carried traces of idealism, talks about using technology for good, about solving global challenges, but they sometimes rang hollow against the backdrop of corporate realities. Rachel couldn't help but wonder, had the company lost sight of its original mission, or had it simply outgrown it? Amidst these frustrations, Rachel found solace outside of work. In the quiet hours after her long days ended, she rediscovered parts of herself that had been buried under years of relentless dedication. Writing poetry became her escape, a way to process emotions she rarely expressed aloud. Her verses weren't polished or perfect, they were raw and honest, capturing the complexities of her life. Some nights she wrote about gratitude for the opportunities she'd had, for the people she'd met along the way. Other times her words brimmed with sadness and longing, reflecting the toll her job had taken on her spirit. Beyond poetry, Rachel also threw herself into mentoring young women in tech. She remembered how intimidating it had been when she first entered the industry, unsure of whether she belonged. Now she wanted to ensure others didn't feel the same way. On weekends, she volunteered at local schools, teaching coding workshops and sharing stories from her career. Seeing the spark of curiosity in students' eyes reminded her of why she'd fallen in love with technology in the first place. These moments reignited something inside her, a sense of purpose that had dimmed over the years. Despite finding fulfillment outside of Google, Rachel struggled to reconcile her two worlds. At work, she continued to perform her duties with the same precision and care that had earned her respect throughout her career. But internally, she wrestled with conflicting emotions. Was she enabling a system she no longer believed in? Could she justify staying simply because it was comfortable? These questions haunted her, gnawing away at her resolve. One particular incident stood out as a turning point. It happened during a leadership summit where Sundar delivered a keynote speech. Standing on stage, he spoke passionately about Google's potential to change the world. He talked about harnessing artificial intelligence to tackle climate change, improving access to education, and bridging digital divides. The audience erupted in applause, inspired by his vision. But as Rachel sat in the crowd, listening intently, she felt a pang of disillusionment. She knew Sundar meant every word he said. He truly believed in the power of technology to drive positive change. But she also knew the reality behind the scenes. The same week Sundar gave that speech, Rachel had witnessed heated debates among executives over budget cuts that would directly affect projects aimed at underserved communities. She'd seen proposals for groundbreaking initiatives shelved because they didn't promise immediate returns, and she'd watched employees grow disheartened as their ideas were dismissed in favor of safer, more profitable ventures. As Sundar wrapped up his presentation, Rachel realized something profound. The gap between rhetoric and action was wider than ever. Google still had the resources and talent to make a real difference, but somewhere along the way, it had stopped prioritizing that mission. For Rachel, this realization was both heartbreaking and liberating. Heartbreaking because it confirmed her fears about the company she loved. Liberating because it gave her clarity. She could no longer ignore the misalignment between her values and her work. That evening, as she walked home from the conference center, Rachel allowed herself to dream for the first time in years. What if she stepped away from Google? What if she pursued the passions that brought her joy instead of suppressing them? The thought was terrifying, yes, but also exhilarating. She imagined writing full-time, publishing her poems, and inspiring others through her words. She pictured traveling to schools across the country, sharing her experiences with young minds eager to learn. Most importantly, she envisioned living a life aligned with her principles. A life where success wasn't measured by titles or paychecks, but by the impact she made on those around her. Of course, leaving wouldn't be easy. Loyalty still tugged at her heartstrings, and the fear of the unknown loomed large. But for the first time, Rachel entertained the possibility that walking away might be exactly what she needed. Not just for herself, but as a statement. If someone, like her, who had devoted over a decade to the company, could leave, perhaps it would prompt others to reflect on their own roles and choices. Perhaps it would remind them that even the smallest voices mattered. That greatness wasn't built solely on brilliance, but on authenticity, empathy, and courage. And so, as Rachel lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, she made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let fear hold her back anymore. Change was inevitable, and while it scared her, it also offered hope, a chance to reclaim her identity and live a life true to who she really was. Little did she know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would leave an indelible mark not only on her own journey, but on the very organization she was preparing to leave behind. The cracks in Rachel's resolve widened with each passing day. She tried to ignore them, burying herself deeper into her work, hoping that the familiar rhythm of her routine would drown out the growing unease within her. But no matter how hard she pushed forward, the weight of her dissatisfaction lingered, a constant companion she couldn't shake off. It was as if the universe itself conspired to force her hand, delivering one challenge after another until she could no longer deny the truth. Something had to give. One particularly grueling week became the breaking point, a whirlwind of back-to-back meetings across 3 continents that left Rachel physically and emotionally drained. Sundar's schedule was packed tighter than ever, with barely a moment to breathe between engagements. Rachel juggled time zones, coordinated last-minute changes, and ensured every detail was flawless. For 12 years, this level of intensity had been par for the course, but this time felt different. The pressure wasn't just external. It came from within, too. A gnawing sense that all her efforts were leading nowhere meaningful. It happened on the final leg of the trip. During a high-stakes presentation in Tokyo, Sundar was set to deliver a keynote address to a room full of industry leaders, investors, and journalists. The stakes were sky high and the margin for error non-existent. Rachel double-checked every logistical detail, triple-confirmed the venue arrangements, and even rehearsed the transitions between slides with Sundar beforehand. Everything seemed perfect, or so she thought. When the day arrived, disaster struck in the smallest yet most glaring way. Due to a miscommunication with the local team, the wrong version of Sundar's presentation was loaded onto the system. By the time Rachel realized the mistake, it was too late to fix it without causing a scene. Sundar handled the situation gracefully, improvising seamlessly as he always did. To the audience, nothing appeared amiss. But behind the scenes, Rachel felt the full weight of her rare oversight crash down on her. After the event, instead of gratitude for pulling through under pressure, Rachel faced sharp criticism from some members of the executive team. They questioned whether she still had what it took to handle such high-profile responsibilities. One senior manager remarked dismissively, "Maybe it's time we reconsider who's managing these critical tasks." The words stung more than Rachel cared to admit. Over the years, she had weathered countless stressful situations, earning trust and respect along the way. Yet here she was, being judged not for her years of dedication but for a single forgivable mistake. That night, alone in her hotel room, Rachel allowed herself to cry, a release of pent-up frustration, exhaustion, and heartache. She replayed the day's events over and over in her mind, analyzing every decision, every missed cue. But beneath the surface-level reflection lay a deeper reckoning. This wasn't just about the presentation or the criticism. It was about the cumulative toll of years spent pouring her soul into a role that rarely acknowledged her humanity. It was about the realization that no matter how much she gave, there would always be someone ready to question her worth. As dawn broke over Tokyo, Rachel made a decision. She wouldn't let this moment define her. Instead, she would use it as the catalyst she needed to reclaim control of her life. Sitting at the small desk in her hotel room, she opened her laptop and began drafting her resignation letter. At first, the words flowed hesitantly, weighed down by doubt and fear. But as she wrote, clarity emerged. She poured her heart into the letter, not just explaining her reasons for leaving, but articulating the lessons she'd learned and the hopes she held for the future. Over the next few weeks, Rachel approached her remaining time at Google with a renewed sense of purpose. She meticulously prepared handover documents, ensuring a smooth transition for whoever would take her place. She reached out to colleagues she hadn't spoken to in months, reconnecting over coffee or quick chats. And she took moments for herself, savoring the little things she'd often overlooked amidst the chaos, like watching the sunset from her office window, or enjoying a quiet lunch without checking her phone. Still, the hardest part was deciding how to say goodbye. Rachel knew a simple email or exit interview wouldn't suffice. She wanted her departure to leave an impression, not out of spite, but as a reminder of the importance of valuing people beyond their roles. On her final day, she left a single envelope on her desk, addressed to Sundar and the executive team. Inside was a letter that captured her 12-year journey, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. It was honest, heartfelt, and unflinching in its critique of the company's shortcomings. Yet it also carried a message of hope, urging them to reflect on the kind of culture they wanted to build moving forward. As Rachel walked out of the building for the last time, she felt lighter than she had in years. There was sadness. Yes, but also freedom, a sense that she was finally stepping into a chapter of her life where she could truly be herself. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she was excited to find out. Little did she realize, however, that her letter would spark conversations far beyond her expectations, forcing those she left behind to confront uncomfortable truths about the organization they had helped create. The envelope sat innocuously on Rachel's desk, its plain white surface belying the weight of the words contained within. It was addressed simply, "To Sundar and team." When Sundar arrived that morning, he noticed it immediately. At first glance, it seemed like any other piece of correspondence, perhaps a note from HR or a routine memo, but something about its placement caught his attention. The desk was otherwise immaculate, cleared of personal belongings and neatly organized for the next assistant to take over. This single envelope stood out, almost as if it were waiting to be discovered. Curiosity piqued, Sundar opened the envelope and began reading. Within moments, the bustling energy of the office faded into silence around him. Rachel's letter wasn't just a farewell. It was a mirror, reflecting truths many had chosen to ignore. Her words were measured yet unflinching, weaving together gratitude, critique, and hope in a way that left no room for dismissal. She started by thanking Sundar and the leadership team for the opportunities they'd given her over the years. She acknowledged their brilliance, their vision, and the countless ways they had inspired her. But then she shifted gears, addressing issues she believed needed urgent attention. Rachel wrote candidly about the growing disconnect between Google's stated values and its actions. She described how employees often felt undervalued, particularly those in support roles who worked tirelessly behind the scenes but rarely received recognition. She recounted instances where profit-driven decisions overshadowed initiatives aimed at making a positive societal impact. And she highlighted the toll this culture took, not only on morale but on innovation itself. When people feel invisible, she wrote, their creativity dims. When voices are silenced, progress stalls. Her tone wasn't accusatory but deeply reflective, urging the leaders to consider the human cost of their relentless pursuit of success. She pointed out that while Google prided itself on being a company that changed the world, it risked losing sight of what truly mattered: connection, empathy, and purpose. Her closing paragraph struck a chord that resonated long after the final sentence. You cannot claim to change the world without first changing yourselves. I hope my departure serves as a reminder that even the smallest voices deserve to be heard, and that greatness is built not only on brilliance but on gratitude. When Sundar finished reading, he sat back in his chair, stunned. He read the letter again, slower this time, absorbing each word. Then, without hesitation, he called an impromptu meeting with the executive team. When everyone gathered in the conference room, Sundar handed them copies of Rachel's letter. The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation. No one knew what to expect. As they began reading, the room fell eerily silent. Pages rustled softly as eyes scanned line after line, absorbing the depth of Rachel's message. At first, there was discomfort. Some executives shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. Rachel's observations weren't entirely new. They had been whispered about in hallways and muttered during coffee breaks, but seeing them articulated so clearly in black and white made them impossible to ignore. One senior leader broke the silence, attempting to downplay the criticism. She's just one person, he said dismissively. Surely we can't base sweeping changes on a single perspective. But Sundar cut him off. That's exactly why we need to listen, he replied firmly. If someone like Rachel, who has dedicated 12 years of her life to this company, feels this way, then we have a problem. And it's not just her. It's everyone else who hasn't spoken up because they don't think we'll hear them. His words hung heavy in the air, prompting others to speak up. A few admitted they had noticed similar patterns but hadn't known how to address them. Another confessed feeling conflicted about recent decisions that prioritized profits over people. Slowly, the conversation shifted from defensiveness to introspection. For the first time in years, the executive team engaged in an honest dialogue about the state of the company, not through the lens of quarterly earnings or market share, but through the lived experiences of those who kept it running. As the meeting stretched on, ideas began to emerge. What could they do to better recognize the contributions of support staff? How could they foster a culture that valued empathy as much as ambition? These questions didn't yield immediate answers, but they planted seeds of change. By the end of the session, there was a shared understanding. Rachel's letter wasn't an attack, it was a gift. It forced them to confront uncomfortable truths and reminded them of the importance of staying grounded in their mission. Word of the letter spread quickly throughout the company. Initially, rumors swirled about its contents, fueled by whispers, in cafeterias and Slack channels. Employees speculated wildly, wondering what Rachel had written to spark such a reaction from the leadership team. When Sundar decided to share excerpts of the letter during an all-hands meeting, the speculation turned into awe. Reading aloud, he paused frequently, letting the weight of Rachel's words sink in. His voice trembled slightly when he reached the closing lines, and for a brief moment he looked visibly emotional. The response was overwhelming. Employees flooded internal forums with messages of support, sharing their own stories of feeling overlooked or undervalued. Some expressed admiration for Rachel's courage, while others pledged to carry forward her message. Managers began holding team discussions, encouraging open conversations about workplace culture and employee well-being. Even outside Google, news of Rachel's letter sparked debates across industries, with professionals weighing in on the challenges faced by support staff and the need for greater recognition of their contributions. For Sundar, the letter served as both a wake-up call and a source of inspiration. In the weeks that followed, he announced several initiatives aimed at addressing the issues Rachel had raised. Among them was a program designed to celebrate unsung heroes within the organization, employees, whose work often went unnoticed, but was critical to the company's success. He also introduced policies to improve work-life balance, reduce burnout, and create more inclusive spaces for feedback. While these changes wouldn't happen overnight, they signaled a commitment to reevaluating priorities and rebuilding trust. Meanwhile, Rachel remained unaware of the ripple effect her letter had created. After leaving Google, she spent her first days away from the office simply breathing, allowing herself to adjust to the absence of constant demands. She revisited old hobbies, reconnecting with passions she'd set aside during her tenure. Writing. Poetry became a daily ritual, helping her process the whirlwind of emotions that came with starting anew. Friends and family marveled at the transformation, noting how much lighter she seemed. It wasn't until former colleagues reached out that Rachel realized the impact of her decision. Messages poured in from co-workers thanking her for speaking up and sharing how her letter had prompted meaningful conversations within teams. Some confided that they too had considered leaving, but now felt hopeful about the possibility of change. Others expressed admiration for her bravery, calling her a role model for standing firm in her values. Though flattered, Rachel remained humble. "I didn't write the letter for recognition," she told one friend over coffee. "I wrote it because I wanted them to remember that every person matters, not just the ones in the spotlight." Her goal had never been to dismantle the system, but to nudge it toward improvement. If her departure inspired even a fraction of the reflection and action she hoped for, she considered it a success. Looking back, Rachel couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. For 12 years, she had worked tirelessly to make others shine, content to remain unseen. Yet in walking away, she had finally stepped into the light. Not as Sundar Pichai's assistant, but as Rachel Carter, a woman unafraid to speak her truth and leave a lasting legacy. Months turned into years, and Rachel Carter's life took on a rhythm she had never imagined possible during her time at Google. Far removed from the high-pressure world of tech giants, she embraced a simpler yet profoundly fulfilling existence. Her mornings began with quiet reflection, a cup of tea in hand, sunlight streaming through her window, and a notebook where she scribbled lines of poetry or jotted down ideas for her next project. Gone were the days of rushing to meetings or managing endless emails. Instead, Rachel found joy in slowing down, savoring moments that reminded her of what truly mattered. Her decision to leave Google hadn't just freed her from a demanding job, it had unlocked parts of herself she'd long neglected. Writing became more than a hobby, it became her passion. Inspired by her experiences, Rachel poured her thoughts and emotions into a manuscript that eventually grew into a book titled Invisible Threads: The Untold Stories of Support Roles. The book was part memoir, part social commentary, exploring the often overlooked contributions of people in supporting roles across industries. Through vivid storytelling and heartfelt reflections, Rachel shed light on the humanity behind the titles, the unsung heroes who held organizations together but rarely received credit for their efforts. When Invisible Threads hit shelves, it resonated deeply with readers. Employees from all walks of life shared how Rachel's words gave voice to their struggles and validated their feelings of being undervalued. Managers read the book and reevaluated their leadership styles, realizing the importance of recognizing every member of their teams. Critics praised its authenticity, calling it a wake-up call wrapped in warmth. Within weeks, the book climbed bestseller lists, sparking conversations about workplace culture and employee well-being far beyond Silicon Valley. Rachel's newfound fame opened doors she hadn't anticipated. Invitations poured in from conferences, universities, and corporate events eager to hear her speak. At first, public speaking intimidated her. She was used to working behind the scenes, not standing center stage. But as she stepped onto podiums and addressed audiences, she discovered a different kind of strength. Her talks weren't flashy or overly polished. They were raw, honest, and deeply relatable. She spoke about the power of empathy, the importance of gratitude, and the need for workplaces to prioritize people over profits. Each speech left listeners inspired to make changes in their own lives and organizations. One particularly memorable event took place at a global technology summit. As Rachel stood before thousands of attendees, including some familiar faces from her Google days, she recounted her journey. From her early days as an assistant to her bold decision to walk away. When she reached the part about leaving her letter on Sundar's desk, the audience erupted in applause. Afterward, countless individuals approached her, sharing their own stories of feeling unseen or undervalued. Many thanked her for giving them the courage to advocate for themselves, while others promised to implement her ideas in their workplaces. It was then that Rachel realized her impact extended far beyond her personal story. It had become a movement. Back home, Rachel continued, mentoring young women in tech, dedicating weekends to workshops and community programs. She partnered with local schools to create coding clubs, emphasizing not only technical skills but also soft skills like communication, teamwork, and resilience. Her message was simple yet powerful. Success isn't defined by climbing ladders, but by lifting others as you go. Students looked up to her not just as a role model, but as someone who genuinely cared about their futures. Parents wrote letters thanking her for inspiring their children to dream bigger and bolder. Meanwhile, back at Google, the changes sparked by Rachel's letter continued to unfold. Sundar remained committed to fostering a more inclusive and empathetic culture. Initiatives aimed at recognizing support staff gained momentum, with award ceremonies celebrating the contributions of assistants, coordinators, and other behind-the-scenes workers. Employee resource groups flourished, providing safe spaces for open dialogue and collaboration. Policies around work-life balance improved, reducing burnout and increasing retention rates. While challenges persisted, there was a palpable shift toward prioritizing people over processes, a legacy Rachel unknowingly helped shape. Years later, when asked about her decision to leave Google, Rachel smiled softly, her eyes reflecting both wisdom and peace. Walking away wasn't easy, she admitted, but sometimes you have to step out of someone else's shadow to find your own light. For Rachel, stepping away wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of self-discovery. It taught her that true fulfillment comes not from external validation, but from living authentically and aligning with your values. Her journey served as a reminder that even the smallest actions can spark monumental change. By choosing to leave on her terms and sharing her truth, Rachel illuminated paths for countless others. She proved that greatness isn't reserved for those in leadership positions. It belongs to anyone willing to stand firm in their convictions and use their voice for good. And though she no longer worked at Google, her influence endured, woven into the fabric of the company and the lives of those she touched. In the end, Rachel's story wasn't just about walking away. It was about stepping forward into uncertainty, forward into purpose, and forward into a future where every thread, no matter how invisible, played a vital role in the tapestry of life.